Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Glad to see you back.
Good to be back, Dr. Paul. How are you?
Doing well. You've solved all the problems that you went to deal with.
I came back from your favorite city.
Oh, yeah. You went over to the Hill and visit all your old friends.
Oh, yeah, exactly. All my lobbyist friends.
Well, anyway, we're still alive and well. We survived the week, and the country's in worse shape, though, and it was all our fault. We didn't get out there soon enough. But we have an article and a headline. We just want to start off with a headline, from Zero Hedge, dealing with, in a way, spending too much money.
Yeah.
And, I imagine more people on this show may be getting tired of me talking about why Fed is so important, because all bad things from government wouldn't be there if they didn't have the Fed. The finances be all through the fraud of that monetary system. Anyway, people see they're coming around to thinking that the economy and inflation is somehow related to the Federal Reserve. And because they print a lot of money and devalue as a currency. And a lot of people, especially in our audience, would understand that. But the one thing that our article here might be used to make a point, and that is when you have a lot of cash flowing around and the money supply going up, interest rates go down, and people do things differently because the price of money is very important to everybody, Wall Street, investors, all business people. So when they're encouraged to do the wrong thing, instead of having a limited amount of cash, and there is a condition where people will invest and make mistakes. They're glad to gamble, but they just might be making a mistake instead of when interest rates are designed by savings. That's a different story.
Yeah.
But that's a thing called malinvestment. And I think what we're talking about is a malinvestment. There's a lot of cash, we're rich, and we've been able to maintain the reserve standard, and people are getting nervous about it, but we're still there. And that tends to encourage our politicians to live way beyond their means, and the people as well. They don't say, oh, well, can you find us some money, or can you take it from someplace and do this? No, they just want the money. If like the strikes going on, they're striking over lower wages. But there's several reasons for that, but one is their purchasing power is way down. But anyway, the headline I want to draw attention to is America laughs. After spending $640 million on migrants and billions abroad, FEMA is broke. Would you have ever guessed it? And that is the height of what malinvestment and inflation do. We wouldn't be doing all that stuff overseas, and we would be more interested in taking care of our emergencies here at home.
Yeah, it's an absolute scandal because we had this horrific Hurricane Helene, which struck last week. Absolutely devastated parts of Eastern Carolinas and elsewhere. I mean, if you see some of the photos, it looks like worse than a war zone. And it's not only, we had a tough time here with Beryl, but over there, from what I've read, it wasn't just that they had to reconnect the lines like we had. It took a few days. But for there, the power stations are underwater. They're out of commission. And there's no power stations to replace them with because they sent a bunch of them overseas to Ukraine. So you're right, absolutely, by the way you started, Dr. Paul, is that we're facing eye to eye with the end of the empire. It's like a kid who inherited a ton of money from wealthy parents and did nothing to invest it, but just spent it at that high lifestyle. And all of a sudden he looks around, he was subsidizing all his friends, and he's out of money. And so that's what happened. Mayorkis, if you put that first one up, this is the article Dr. Paul's talking about. Mayorkis got on TV. Go to the first one. That's the bonus one, please. There we go. Thank you. So here's the article. And Mayorkis came on TV, Dr. Paul, the director of Homeland Security, which if you'd had your way, never would have been there. And he said, well, we don't have any more money to help people. We don't have enough money to get through the hurricane system, the hurricane season. And as the Hedge article points out, FEMA spent $640 million to help migrants, and I have some more info on that. But if you go to the next one, it wasn't just that. That's terrible. That's terrible. But this is another tweet that points it out. This is from the article, but someone else tweeted, in almost 1 week, the Biden-Harris administration approved $8.7 billion in military aid for Israel, $8 billion in military aid for Ukraine, $567 million in military support for Taiwan, and he adds a $750 one-time emergency assistance payments for the American victims of Hurricane Helene. If that doesn't tell you anything about the priorities of the U.S. government, then nothing does.
You know, and I find what they're talking about now are just excuses. People know that they're going to continue with the military-industrial complex. They're going to spend, and people know that eventually they're going to send some money to FEMA. But it's an excuse. It's deception, and they get away with it. But it also adds on to the problems that we have, because it doesn't. It's not real money. It's paper money, but there's enough people to trust it, and it will work for a while. But in a way, it seemed like manufacturing these conditions must have a little bit of help from the military-industrial complex, because they have a priority, even if the priority is internationalism and other countries that we're defending, and it has very little to do with our national defense. I would think that people are starting to wake up to that. Let's hope so. So the military-industrial complex gets involved, and they pass out these lies, and then there'll be others that will join in, and the people who really support the war effort will have to find an excuse. So how are they going to vote? Let's say next week they come up with $1 billion to help the flood victims. Who's going to vote against it? We'll have maybe a half a dozen or so. But so well, you can't vote against the hurricane victims. So that's the way the system works. But eventually it quits working because the purchasing power of the dollar goes down. That is, you can keep printing and printing and printing, and the problems get worse. So, but it'll be interesting to see how that works out. But you know, there's a lot of people now, and they always have. You know, even when we had a hurricane here a little while ago, and I didn't consider it one of the worst in the world, but it was significant. And we had church groups knocking on our door offering help, and they came from a distance. And can you imagine how many? One time we had a bad hurricane in Victoria, and a lot of people wanted to go in and take care of their own business, and they had volunteers. Too many regulations. You can't do that today, and some people couldn't get into to see their own property. What a shame.
Exactly. And you know, we're not saying this because we're arguing for more FEMA spending. We don't want FEMA to exist, but it's all about the priorities. All of this foreign garbage that is just a total waste of money, and plus it's just a stop to the military-industrial complex, as you point out. That is fine, but if you're going to spend it helping Americans, now here's something that's interesting. And I have to admit, was not paying enough attention to this. But something has happened while we really weren't looking closely, which is that Mayorkis and the Biden administration have transformed FEMA from being the organization we remember, where if you have a hurricane or a fire or whatever, they'll come and give you some money to rebuild or what have you, this sort of thing. Actually, they've been transforming it like they transformed everything in the government. Put on that bonus clip now. No, put on the bonus clip, please. So this is very, very interesting. This is posted by America First Legal. Over the last 4 years, the Biden-Harris administration has steadily transformed FEMA, the agency responsible for responding to natural disasters like Hurricane Helene, into an illegal alien resettlement agency that emphasizes DEI over public safety. Now you can read this here where they highlight what the FEMA has actually been involved in, Dr. Paul. It has nothing to do with emergency or emergency management. It has to do with resettling illegal immigrants into the United States and giving them tons of money.
And then there's going to be a guilt trip placed on people who don't endorse the DEI. You don't care about people and this sort of thing. But the one thing that the article mentioned, but I think it's been well known, and that has to do with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve.
Yeah.
Of course, matter of fact, when it started, or in the early years, I voted against it, believing that the market could handle things like that. But still, if we have a lot of oil there, and they argue there's a strategic purpose for that in case.
Yeah.
So, but it was down to what, 25% or something of what it used to be. They've used that up and sold it to manipulate markets.
Yeah.
You know, either get the cash and spend it on something else. But it is just a disaster on what runaway government does.
Yeah.
Because even if you're trying to solve a problem, you can't even if you want to switch, then you're challenged, like you indicate and I indicate, that yes, we have to say, well, we don't want to just ignore it, and we don't want to say, well, just dump the oil and things like that. There's still a responsibility there, but it shouldn't get started. That's how the wars start. You start the war a little bit, well, you can't quit now, our troops are over there.
Yeah.
Then we have to protect the troops. How many times have you heard that we're sending in the troops? Matter of fact, I think I mentioned that this past week. They're sending in troops to, more troops to protect our troops.
Yeah.
Well, why were our troops there?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's perfect. Well, this is from that article as well. This is someone else's tweet, but it's kind of some tear sheets from some headlines that further demonstrate how FEMA has been, I would say, hijacked by these extreme people. So I'm going to read a couple of them. Department of Homeland Security announces $380 million in additional funding to communities receiving migrants. FEMA awards $111 million to the Emergency Food and Shelter Program to assist migrants. Politico, New York City to get $104.6 million from FEMA for asylum seekers. Department of Homeland Security announces distribution of more than $77 million in congressional funding for communities receiving migrants. FEMA, Department of Homeland Security, announces $300 million in direct funding to communities receiving migrants and $340 million for a new competitive awards process. The last one is U.S. Embassy in El Salvador. Department of Homeland Security announces distribution of more than $12 million in funding in El Salvador. What does that have to do with emergency management in the U.S.?
I think the American people would accept a bit of a solution that I've talked about over the years, and that is, let's say they want to put $1 billion into flood protection. Yes, that's not part of the Constitution, but what if we did that under the circumstances, but you can't print more money? Why don't you require it, if you want $1 billion to spend at home for people who are being washed away with a hurricane, why can't you take it away from Ukraine?
Yeah.
Funding? But what did they do? They added up on Ukraine. Matter of fact, that's probably why they passed that a week or so ago, before people started thinking about these costs. But that is so tragic that and people must feel helpless. I mean, we talk about it, we understand it. I was in Congress, but really, we didn't change the course of history.
Yeah.
And except we do hope that we planted a couple seeds.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to have this one clip because I'm glad you mentioned that earlier, because our experience for hurricanes here, especially people down here in Brazoria County, they do not want FEMA around at all. But skip that one and go to the one with the woman's photo on it if you can. There we go. The next one, actually. Go to the next. There we go. So this is an interesting tweet. So Hurricane Helene, Tennessee resident says, Tennessee FEMA sending out text messages telling everyone do not help neighbors in need. Messages saying, quote, we don't want you to donate stuff to other people. You need to just donate money and stuff to us and get your instructions from us and listen to us. They were like, do not donate your time. If you're going to come back here and bark orders at us and then expect people to just give you money and trust us, you're going to try to take care of us. So they're furious.
Isn't that sick?
The FEMA comes in and says, don't help your neighbors. We had it here. We've experienced that every single time.
Exactly opposite. But we're talking about a higher law. Their higher law is themselves. Others are saying there's a higher law that when people are desperate, you're supposed to make an effort to help if you're capable of helping. So that is so ugly.
Yeah. They come in and do that.
That attitude.
Everyone in this area is familiar with that, I can assure you.
Yeah, that was it. How did you voted against FEMA during the hurricane? They said, "How'd you get reelected?"
Yeah, your numbers went up.
And we knew there were a lot of people. They saw FEMA as a hindrance.
Yeah.
That I didn't read that before, but that is just horrible.
Terrible.
That is so descriptive of what they are. It's power.
Yeah.
It's power. It has nothing to do with caring for people.
Yeah.
So
I remember when we had a few years ago the terrible hurricane, and FEMA came down and their trucks got stuck in the mud, and the good old boys with their 4x4s were pulling them out of the mud. So that's how that works. Anyway, the second story we want to talk about today, I don't know what we will title this: unintended consequences, intended consequences, the folly of foreign interventionism. But put this next one. This is from Politico. Here's poor old Biden. Look at him. Biden confronts the limits of his influence over zero. By limits, I would say zero influence over Israel. But he is upset, Dr. Paul, because after giving them literally everything they want, every single bomb they want, they won't listen to him when he says, please don't bomb all of the energy facilities in Iran, because that's going to put oil at over $200 a barrel and destroy our economy.
We did see a little blip up, but the serious problems have not yet hit, but they will come. And we cannot depend on the federal government to deal with COVID and viruses like that, because they make things worse. But yet it continues. That's why I'm pessimistic about a gradual, sensible shift in gears. Like I mentioned, give somebody that has real need at the moment and take it away from someplace else. I always said, though, if they're going to spend $1 billion and you have to cut somebody's $1 billion, off another program, you ought to cut a little bit more to knock down the deficit.
Yeah.
And that is so extreme. When a president even hints at that kind of stuff, he endangers his life.
Yeah.
And especially if they're attacking some money, they're going to all these wars that are going on.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, about Trump's danger, because he at least hints to some of these problems.
Yeah. So Biden is upset that Israel won't listen to him. He tells them to do something and they don't listen to him. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, that is what you should expect. To think that he has credibility, and of course this whole thing that's gone on in the last 6 months, where they're the Democrats, we love democracy, and then they say, well, I think we have to get rid of that guy, so they have a little in-house coup, and somebody that gets us this far along, I sure hope doesn't. It would be really bitter if you end up seeing that an individual has never had a vote and never had an election by the people who yell and scream about democracy.
Yeah, no kidding.
But their use of democracy is nothing more than manipulation. Matter of fact, there are a lot of people, including myself, that in many ways there's the dictatorship of the majority is very strong. 51% says that is a deal. But the people who are in charge always stay the same.
Yeah.
People who organize these organizations to bring together all the special interests to make up the 51%. So it does become a political thing, and the people unfortunately go along with it, and we end up with the mess we have.
Yeah. Well, let's go through this Politico article a little bit now. If you put on this next clip, this is from the article. So the President, Joe Biden, he's very upset. Biden and his senior aides have urged Israel to avoid direct attacks on Iran's nuclear facilities when it strikes back against Tehran. The latest sign of the limits of U.S. power to prevent all but the most extreme actions by Israel. And we watched this for the last year, Dr. Paul. We've watched Joe Biden saying, oh, please, can have a ceasefire. Here's some more weapons. Oh, can you please stop killing so many civilians? Here's some more weapons. Oh, can you please not go into Lebanon? By the way, here's some more weapons. And then they're wondering why they won't listen. I mean, it reminds you're a parent, I'm a parent. When you give your kids every single thing they want without any kind of restrictions, the kids don't understand it when you finally restrict them and they flip out. And that's what's happening with Israel. Not to say that we should give it with the restrictions or anything, but it's just, why is anyone surprised? And so put the next one up. The directive illustrates the limits of Biden's waning influence, if you put that one up, please, over events in the Middle East, and an acknowledgement that he may be unable to stop what his administration has spent a year trying to prevent: regional war. Now this is a sort of a classic Politico take, because how would you say he's been trying to prevent a regional war when he's literally been pouring gasoline on every single little brush fire there?
See, what they don't have is a basic principle to rely on. And say, if the basic principle, you could choose one. Choose a moral principle. Choose an economic principle of, if you do that, this happens, if you put on tariffs and argue it that way. Or you could talk about the Constitution and say, well, are we allowed to do it under the Constitution? But they don't even ask these questions. They try to get in. It's sort of looking at the mess that we have in medicine today. We have all these regulations, all the benefits, and all the special interests, managing medicine. But it's because government's involved, and they shouldn't be. And yet now there is no basic principle to appear, to use to solve some of these problems. They just say, well, if it looks like a good idea and there's some people for it, and if somebody, just because they're going to make a couple dollars, that's beside the point. And it's the dollars and power that really wins too many battles, and that's why the day of reckoning, if we can wake up enough people, the day of reckoning can be a blessing, because maybe we can put together something a lot better than what we're suffering through now.
Yeah, and it's the whole situation of the U.S. backing up everything Israel does in the region, no matter what, and then wondering why they won't be listened to. Now, skip ahead to this one. This is Jake Sullivan, who's being quoted in the same article. We're proud of the actions that we've taken. If you can skip ahead, I think a couple to that. Here we go. So this is the reason. So we're proud of the actions we've taken alongside Israel to protect and defend Israel, said National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. We have made it clear that there will be consequences, severe consequences for this attack, and we will work with Israel to make that case. So on the one hand, he's saying, we're going to fight with Israel against Iran. And on the other hand, they're saying, why won't you guys listen to us when we tell you? Now here is our favorite member of the U.S. House of Representatives who had a specific response to Jake Sullivan's comments. If you put this up, Sullivan says, work with Israel, excuse me, the Constitution requires you to work with Congress, which is a great quote from Thomas Massey. That, what are you talking about, administration? You're wondering why you have no influence, but you're backing up everything they do.
They're complaining that Biden is wishy-washy, and he is, and nobody knows where he stands. But the answer is always, he has to be tough. He can't say he's going to do it and doesn't do it. They're always looking for more toughness. But what they don't realize is, in many ways, Trump might be an example of this, at least to some degree, that it's sometimes tough to back off. Sometimes not to be tempted by the pressure to just go into these countries and police the world and yielding to the industrialists, the people that are making the money, and always with a threat, we'll cancel you if you don't do this, and it's universal. But they think toughness only means more weapons, more threats, we're in charge, you will do it. Don't ever be wishy-washy. So somebody like Biden, he's somewhere in the middle. He wants to look tough, but he can't be tough. And I think it'd be better to be tough on a principle that says that you should you should stand up for what is right. And that is sometimes a much tougher job than the other.
Because you're going to have people hitting you against you, Well, I'm going to, sorry, we both got something today. I'm going to close out today by thanking everyone. Happy to be back with all of you who are watching us live. We appreciate the live viewers every day. And I'm going to show a little photo, a little show and tell at the end. So I got up on stage, Dr. Paul, and I looked at some great people out there on Saturday. And I thought, I want to commemorate being there. So I took a selfie before I gave my speech. I'll put that last photo up. Here I am on stage getting ready to give my talk on war narratives. And so it was a lot of fun. I ran into some great people, some good friends. Max Blumenthal, Anya Parampil were there, and some other really good friends. Some good folks from the Libertarian Institute were there. So it was really good.
That was on government property.
That's right.
Is that a violation of the First Amendment, putting that up?
That's right.
Wonderful.
Anyway, it was a lot of fun. So over to you, Dr. Paul.
So I'm glad you got up there to visit with our friends, and they basically are with us on peace and prosperity, so that's what really counts. But it's a tedious job, and one that we recognize, and one that we believe we contribute a positive note to it, but yet it is a bit times it's a bit frustrating because there's still a lot of weaponry, a lot of special interests opposing peace and prosperity and constitutional ideas. So the enemy is there, but they're being recognized more than before. So there's every reason for us to continue this effort with the help of so many of our viewers and our supporters to keep on fighting for and supporting the principles of liberty. And then I think we are more likely to have peace and prosperity. Thanks for tuning in.